Hi, my name is Brice, and I'm the owner of Velodrome Coffee Company, and this is another video in our Brew Guide series. So for this one, we're gonna be talking about the V60. So this is a ceramic model, number 2, I think this one is. And the V60 is really cool because it has a really big hole at the bottom. So it's different than a Chemex or a Kalita or some other pour-over brewers in the sense that you get a pretty high flow rate with this one. And the filter is very thin, so you get a lot of versatility with how you adjust your grind, and that can really affect your extraction. So, all that to say, it's a great pour-over brewer that gives you a lot of versatility. So, we're gonna do a real simple approach to it today. First thing that I always like to do is go ahead and grab my filter, and all the filters always have this little ridge, crimp on them. I always just get that out of the way by folding it over. Just real simple. The other thing I like to do with my V60 filters, little trick is so they're folded on one side, but I like to just fold them on the second side, kind of like this. So put those two seams together and give this another fold. And that way it just stays open, real nice and easy that way. Throw that in there. And we're gonna go ahead and pre-wet everything that we're gonna be using today. So, all right, so all you gotta do with this is just get some water in there along the sides. Doesn't have to be too crazy or anything special. Just gonna go ahead and get that all pre-wet. And then what I always like to do with my pre-wet water is go ahead and put it in my cup. And that'll start warming the cup up. All right, so that's all set. We're gonna go ahead and grind our coffee. So for this brewer, what I like to do is use 20 grams of coffee to 300 grams of water, and that's a 15-to-1 ratio. And you can also experiment with using less coffee or more water and changing that ratio between a 1 to 15 to a 1 to 17. And depending on how you grind your coffee, how coarse or how fine, you can really pull out some unique flavors. So sometimes you might hear a barista or a coffee person talk about dialing in a coffee. And all that really means is that they're trying to find the best combination of ratio, water temperature, and grind. So this one is kind of pre-dialed in, so we're just gonna go with 20 to 300. So first things first, I'm gonna go to 20 grams there. And I've got my Lido 2 Orphan Espresso hand grinder. And if you use this particular grinder, it's just a full turn. If you don't use this hand grinder, that means nothing to you. And all you should know is that you're looking for a really medium grind. And once I grind this up, I'll show a little bit of it. Kind of reminds me of a kind of coarse sand feel. So we'll go ahead and grind this up. All right. Cool. So our coffee's all ground up here. So if you're using another grinder and you're not quite sure, we'll go ahead and take a look at this. So this is kind of just like a nice coarse sand, is how I like to say. If you feel it between your fingers, it's still kind of gritty, but it's not a powder and it's not big chunks. So it's kind of right in the middle. So that's what we're looking for. Put that back in there. All right. It's always a great idea to reweigh your coffee after you've ground when you're putting it into your brew device, because depending on your grinder, it might retain some of those grinds. So we're gonna do the same thing. All right, right at 20, perfect. Go ahead and give this a little leveling shake, just to level that bed. And the next thing I like to do is just go ahead and make a little divot right in the center of that coffee. Just real simple like that. I'll explain that in a minute. Tare my scale. I'm using an IKEA Black Pearl scale. It's got a timer built in, so that's pretty cool. It's always a good idea to time your V60s to see how your flow rate is. So I'll demonstrate that with this. First things first, I'm gonna start by just pouring about 30 to 40 grams of water into this dry coffee just to let it bloom. So I'm just gonna pour just a little bit to get started. I'm using filtered water at 210 degrees when I took it off of my little base. So right now it's probably at like 205 or so. By the time it hits the coffee, maybe around 200. Gonna go ahead and start my timer and do my first pour. Gonna pour right in the center of that divot and then work my way outward. Just a real nice steady pour. And ended at that one at 35 grams. And what it's doing at this point is releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. It's bubbling. This is what we call the bloom. And it's just gonna release, like I said, a lot of gases, and that's gonna allow, when you actually make the coffee, for the water to bind to the flavors and pull out more in the coffee because the gas is not affecting things. So we're gonna get some of that gas out of there. All right, and then at this point, what I like to do is just real simple spiral pours that start in the middle and work my way outward. I don't do any particular set of, I'm gonna do 100 grams at 30 seconds, and I'm gonna do 80 grams at 45 seconds or whatever. I pretty much just do a nice steady pour until my brewer gets about halfway filled. What I've found with this V60 is that the lower you're able to kind of keep your brew bed in the device, the more consistent you can make your coffee. So if you're gonna stretch out your brew bed to this whole device, water is gonna find a lot of different ways through that coffee. So what we're gonna do is just keep it low. And that way it's only got one way to make that happen. Cool. So right now I've only got about 190 grams of water through the device, and we're going to 300. So I'm just gonna keep an eye on that. And when that starts to drain out, just gonna fill it back up to about halfway. Again, nice little circular spiral pours, very controlled flow. Gonna go almost to the edge, but not quite. And as you can see, a gooseneck kettle is pretty important for a device like this because it's such a delicate pour. So I highly recommend getting something like this, or the Hario is also a great model. This is the Bonavita temperature control kettle. But that being said, you can also find some pretty good finds at like thrift stores. And all you gotta do then is boil some water and transfer it into that kettle and make it work for you. All right, we're at 286 and it's about halfway full. Just gonna let it drain just a little bit more again and do my final pour here. Perfect. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and let that drain through. And my rule of thumb for a V60 is your time should take about a minute or so for every 100 grams. So we're hoping that this stops draining, I would say between 3 and 4 minutes is ideal. So we'll see what this does. All right, it's just finishing up dripping and it is right at 3 minutes. So that's good. We'll taste it. If it tastes maybe a little watery or a little under extracted, then what we might want to do is just fine up our grind just a little bit so that the water has a harder time getting through there and it's going to pull out more flavor. So with all that to say, we'll just taste it and we'll see what it's like. Gonna dump out my pre-wet water. All right, like to give this a good swirl. Sometimes when you make a V60, different extraction levels will kind of settle into the cup or into the decanter in different levels. So we're just gonna mix it up to make sure those are all together. And pour this out. So 300 is just the right amount for like one nice cup and maybe just a little extra, so. Cool.